It was supposed to be an ordinary, light-hearted evening in the Beckham household. One of those moments when fame fades into the background, and the family gathers not as global icons, but simply as themselves. Sir David Beckham, still glowing from the pride and emotion of his recent knighthood, decided to bring a spark of celebration home with a simple display of fireworks for bonfire night. But in a twist that could have come straight from a British sitcom, what began as a warm family moment quickly turned into an unexpectedly hilarious scene that has now become yet another charming Beckham memory. The former footballer, dressed casually and relaxed, stepped outside into the small courtyard of their countryside home, a cozy yet refined space surrounded by trimmed hedges and the faint scent of autumn leaves. The evening sky was dark, but alive with the distant crackle of fireworks echoing from neighboring homes. Victoria Beckham, as always, was there to capture the moment. Her phone poised, her voice filled with both amusement and concern as she warned, "Careful!" Her tone carried that familiar mix of affection and exasperation that only a long-married couple can understand. Sir David crouched down, his concentration unwavering as he prepared to light the fuse of a modest but rather unpredictable firework. The small spark caught, fizzing in the crisp air. There was a brief, deceptive pause, and then, without warning, a loud, heart-jolting bang erupted. The firework exploded far too close for comfort, sending a bright flash across the courtyard. In that instant, the world's calmest man on the pitch became an ordinary husband caught completely off guard. He flinched, jumped back in pure instinct, and his reflexive reaction sent Victoria into fits of laughter. "Are you all right, babe? Are you all right? Do you not like that, babe?" she teased between giggles, her laughter echoing through the courtyard. The playfulness in her voice was impossible to miss. It was the kind of laughter that comes from years of shared memories, from having seen each other in every possible situation, glamorous and ridiculous alike. The video quickly made its way onto her Instagram story, captioned with pure Victoria flair. "That is how the Beckhams do firework night." Behind the humor, though, there was an unmistakable warmth. It wasn't about the firework or the startled reaction. It was about family, about how, even after decades of fame, red carpets, and royal honors, moments like these remind everyone that beneath the gloss of celebrity, they are just a family enjoying life's small, imperfect joys. The Beckham family had gathered at home after an extraordinarily emotional week, one filled with pride, reflection, and nostalgia. Only a day earlier, Sir David had received his long-awaited knighthood, an honor he had dreamed of for years. For a man whose life had been defined by discipline, dedication, and an almost old-fashioned sense of duty, it was the crowning moment of a life that began on the humblest of pitches in East London. The footballer who once wore his country's armband with tears in his eyes now stood before King Charles, his heart full and his voice thick with gratitude. The ceremony at Windsor Castle was intimate, yet magnificent. The soft light pouring through the centuries-old windows. The regal stillness of the room punctuated by a single gesture of acknowledgement from the king himself. When Sir David bowed his head to receive the honor, decades of hard work, sacrifice, and perseverance seemed to crystallize into one quiet, dignified moment. For a man who had once been vilified for a red card in 1998 and later redeemed himself as a national hero, this was not just a title. It was closure. He later admitted, "It had been an emotional day," his words reflecting a lifetime of devotion not just to football, but to the values it instilled: resilience, teamwork, and humility. To those watching, it was impossible not to see the glimmer of tears in his eyes as he stood proudly in his tailored suit, the medal gleaming against his chest. His parents, Ted and Sandra, watched from the crowd, their faces a portrait of pride. Ted, now 77, had been the one who used to drive young David to practice in the rain, sometimes sitting for hours in the car while his son chased his dreams across muddy pitches. Sandra, now 76, was the quiet constant, the mother who washed his kits, packed his lunches, and believed in him long before the rest of the world did. The moment they saw their son being knighted by the king, something in their expressions spoke volumes. For them, it wasn't about royal recognition. It was about seeing the boy they raised with love and discipline being honored not just for his skill, but for his character. Victoria, too, stood with quiet pride, elegant as ever, her face glowing with that unmistakable blend of love and admiration. She has seen David through every season of his life, the triumphs, the heartbreaks, the public scrutiny, and the quiet moments in between. She knew better than anyone how much this knighthood meant to him. And though she's often portrayed as the sophisticated designer, the unshakable fashion icon, at that moment she was simply a wife watching her husband fulfill a lifelong dream. Their children, too, were there to share in the joy. Romeo, now 23, with his father's sharp features and calm demeanor. Cruz, 20, who shares David's charisma and a growing love for music. And Harper, just 14, still the baby of the family, her bond with her father as tender as ever. They stood proudly beside him, each representing a different piece of their parents' legacy, the charm, the ambition, the quiet strength. The family celebrated together afterward at Gordon Ramsay's restaurant in Chelsea, a close friend's warm hospitality, adding a familiar touch to an extraordinary night. There was laughter, champagne, stories that stretched back years, and an unspoken understanding that this was a milestone not just for David, but for all of them. Yet amid the celebrations, there was one absence that no one could ignore. Brooklyn, the eldest, was missing. The 26-year-old aspiring chef was nowhere to be seen at Windsor Castle, nor at the dinner afterward. It wasn't just a physical absence, it carried emotional weight. According to reports, Brooklyn had not reached out to congratulate his father, nor had he commented publicly on what was undoubtedly one of the biggest moments of David's life. The Sun reported that Brooklyn remained entirely focused on promoting his hot sauce brand, Cloud 23, even as his father was being knighted. When asked by fans and reporters about his family, he offered no comments. An awkward silence that seemed to confirm what insiders had quietly whispered for months, that there was a growing rift between father and son. To many, it was heartbreaking. David Beckham, who had always presented himself as the ultimate family man, now faced what no title or accolade could shield him from, the pain of distance within his own family. Those close to him said he tried to stay composed, brushing off questions about Brooklyn with a polite smile, but his eyes told another story. For all his strength, David has always worn his heart on his sleeve, and fatherhood has been the role he's cherished most. It's unclear what exactly caused the tension. Some sources suggest it began around the time Brooklyn married Nicola Peltz, the American actress and billionaire heiress. The wedding, which should have been a joyous union, reportedly exposed fault lines between the Beckhams and the Peltzes, from disagreements about the event's details to questions about control and publicity. What once seemed like a fairy tale bond between father and son slowly began to cool. Still, those who know the Beckhams say David continues to hold hope that things will improve. Despite everything, he speaks of Brooklyn with love, never resentment. Family is everything, he's said countless times, and he means it. That's why even on a night of celebration, even with the king's honor freshly pinned to his suit, a small part of his heart likely ached for the son who wasn't there.